Smoke and Ashes by Abir Mukherjee. Read by Simon Bubb. Forget not that thou art born as a sacrifice upon the altar of the motherland. Swami Vivekananda. 1. The 21st of December, 1921. It's not unusual to find a corpse in a funeral parlour. It's just rare for them to walk in the door under their own steam. It was a riddle worth savouring, but I didn't have the time, seeing as I was running for my life. A shot rang out and a bullet flew past, hitting nothing more offensive than rooftop laundry. My pursuers, fellow officers of the Imperial Police Force, were firing blindly into the night. That didn't mean they mightn't get lucky with their next round, and while I wasn't afraid of dying, shot in the backside while trying to escape wasn't exactly the epitaph I wanted on my tombstone. And so I ran, opium-fogged, across the rooftops of a sleeping Chinatown, slipping on loose terracotta tiles, sending them smashing to the ground and clambering from one roof to the next, before finally finding shelter in a shallow crawl space beneath the ledge of a low wall which separated one building from its neighbour. The officers drew closer, and I tried to still my breathing as they called out to one another, their voices swallowed by the darkness. The sound suggested they'd separated, now possibly some distance from each other. That was good. It meant they were groping around as aimlessly in the dark as I was, and that for now my best chance of escape lay in staying still and silent. Being caught would lead to some rather awkward questions which I preferred not to have to answer, such as what I happened to be doing in Tangra in the dead of night, smelling of opium and covered in someone else's blood. There was also the small matter of the sickle-shaped blade in my hand. That, too, would be difficult to explain. I shivered as the sweat and the blood evaporated. December was cold, at least by Calcutta standards. Snatches of conversation drifted over. It didn't sound like their hearts were in it. I didn't blame them. They were as likely to stagger off the edge of a roof as they were to stumble across me, and given the events of the last few months, I doubted their morale would be particularly high. Why risk a broken neck chasing shadows along rooftops when no one was going to thank them for it? I willed them to turn back, but they doggedly kept at it, tapping in the blackness with rifle butts and lathis like blind men crossing a road. One set of taps grew louder, a rhythmic presence drawing ever closer. I considered my options, or I would have done had I been able to think of any. Running was out of the question. The man was armed and sounded so close now that even in the dark he'd have little difficulty in shooting me. Taking him on was also a non-starter. I had the blade, but I was hardly going to use it on a fellow officer, and in any case, with 3 of his colleagues in close proximity, the odds of eluding them were shrinking faster than a poppy at sunset. The tone of the tapping changed, taking on an echoing hollowness as it struck the thin concrete of the ledge above my head. The man must have been standing directly above me. He too noticed the change in tenor and stopped in his tracks. He knocked at the ledge with his rifle, then jumped down. I closed my eyes in anticipation of the inevitable, but then a voice called out, one that I recognized. "All right, lads, that's enough. Back inside." The boots turned towards the command, and for the longest of seconds stood rooted, before finally climbing back onto the ledge. They began to move off, and I breathed out, then ran a hand, still sticky with blood, over my face. The voices receded, and the rooftops returned to silence. Minutes passed, and from the street below came shouts, English, Bengali, Chinese, and the sound of lorries starting up. I stayed where I was, shivering in the confines of the crawl space, and tried to make sense of it all. The night had started quite normally, though normal is admittedly a relative term. At any rate, tonight seemed no different from any other night that I visited one of the opium dens which pockmarked Chinatown. From my lodgings in Premchand Boral Street, I'd made my way south to Tangra by one of the many circuitous routes, to a den I was fairly sure I hadn't visited for at least a month.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?